Welcome back to Getting Started with Linux. I'm your host, Daniel Lowrie, and in today's episode, we are going to look at users and groups and their management. Joining me, as always, our good friend, Mr. Ross Brunson. Ross, always a pleasure to have you in the studio here. Now, as we've said, this is about users and groups. The real problem in our systems, right?
Users, not groups.
Not groups, Groups are
groups of users.
It's the users that really cause this consternation. But they don't magically appear out of thin air, right?
Nope.
They actually have to be put in the system, managed, maintained, security, all the other good stuff.
Yep.
And we were just wondering if you could be so kind as to walking us through what that looks like and how that's done.
Okay, so there are two main methods or scenarios of adding users and groups. It's the local system. That's what we're going to cover right now. And then there's a whole other set of things when you've got users that are being created in some sort of a, LDAP or, identity management type of scheme. A lot of organizations have a very large identity management mechanism that they use. And so, but they still need to know how to use users and groups and add them and modify them and delete them, etc., because they'll still be interacting with local systems.
Okay.
So let's start with the basics. All right, so let's take a look at creating that user. So we're going to type user add and then -m. -m says go take the contents of the etc skell directory, /etc/skell for skeleton, and make a copy of that and make it the user's home directory. So if you want to add template files or macros or anything you want into that user's home directory, by default on addition to the system, then we can do that. Okay. No big deal. So we're going to specify ulogin as the user. And when we hit enter, it will have created the user and created the user's home directory. Now the way that we can verify this is we type the grep command and we look for ulogin in the etc passwd password file, the etc shadow file, and the etc group file. And you should see, and we do, see two entries in there. Those two entries are from the password file and the shadow file. Let's take a look at these. The password file's first field is the name of the user. The second field is the X that denotes that the shadow suite is in place, which is where we interact with the etc shadow file. And we'll talk about that password in just a moment. There's the user's UID, the user ID. And that user ID is what the system knows the user as. If you were to remove the user from the password file but leave the user's home directory in place, you would see that it's assigned to user ID 1001. So that's just a good ID. The only match between the user's name and the UID is actually in the etc passwd file. Okay. So the system could care less. This next number here is the group number. So 100 happens to be the user's group. And because this user's group is assigned in the etc passwd file, you will not see normally this user show up as a member of the user's group. This prefixes it, predates it. So if it's in here, you're automatically considered to be a member of that group. So people will search for that and go, I can't find it. Well, yeah, because it's not going to be there. Yeah. And then the last couple pieces here is home ulogin. That's the user's home directory. The one that's assigned to 1001, and then this is the actual shell bin bash. So now let's take a look at the line that is denoted the shadow file. So it's got the same key, ulogin, there's the user's name. Now we have this interesting little thing here of the exclamation point. The exclamation point is there because that's where the encrypted password will be once we set the user's password. So this tells you, I don't have a password for this user yet, make sure you set one. And we'll do that in just a moment. Okay, and then some of this information towards the end here is the password change time frame, password timeouts, grace logins and things like that. And quite honestly, I can never remember what order they're in, and that's what man pages are for.
That's right.
So, okay, so now what we can do, we've created the user. They have a home directory. We've checked those two files. Let's go ahead and do a user mod and capital G. Capital G says the additional groups. So this user is a member of the users group, group 100. Let's put him into the wheel group, and then that'll make it easier for you. So we're going to see that we're modifying the user's information and adding them to the group wheel, which is an administrative group, but it's an easier one to remember. Oops. Wheel, and then ulogin. Let's run that grep command again, and notice that we have a third line now, which says that in the group wheel, number 497, there's the user, ulogin. Now, there's an important difference here. This primary group here, 100, that's the group that the user is considered to be a primary member of. Primary membership is kind of like, if you look at it, primary versus secondary groups, primary is where you were born. Okay. That's the city you were born in, and secondary groups are the ones that you happen to have lived in, and you can have a number of secondary groups. You can have exactly one primary group. That's not to say you can't change it, but it really tears up my analogy if I do that.
Yeah, so okay. Don't do that.
Right. So we'll ignore that, but you get the idea. Yeah. The other thing here is that when you look at the group, especially primary group membership, when you create something on the command like a file or a directory, your primary group is the one that is listed second. So you'll see, my name, Ross B, and then wheel would be the group. So whenever I create something, by default, a file or a directory, then my primary group is the one that's the group owner of that. And that has some implications for later on. Now let's go ahead and set a password for this user. So passwd -L. And sorry, it's not passwd -L, that's to lock it. Do passwd, and then you log in, and we give it a password. Now I'm going to give it a very simple password, which it doesn't like, but because I'm the root user, I can force it.
You're the boss.
That's right. So now let's run that grep command again and see the difference. Notice the huge difference here between what was there before and that. Okay, that is, the password was Linux, by the way.
Oh, okay.
For those of you who are going to try to, type it all in and run John the Ripper on it or whatever, don't bother. It's Linux. Very secure. So this is the encrypted password that has been set by the Shadow Suite and the system for this user. So anytime the user attempts to sign in and it goes to the password field in the etc passwd file, the user database, it will see the X and automatically go to the shadow. The system will go to the shadow file, which is much more locked away than the password file. Password file is relatively open. The shadow file is really locked down to just the root user and the system and barely the root user. Okay? So those are the things that we can do. So we've talked about how to add a user. We've talked about how to modify a user. We've shown you what happens when we create a password for that user. Now let's talk about getting rid of a user. So for example, if I look at ls-l/home, you're going to see that Tux and ulogin have home directories there. Now, you just have to take it on faith that Tux and ulogin have user IDs underneath them. But I'm going to show you what happens when you get rid of somebody. Okay? So let's say that Ursula K login here, ulogin, is getting ready to leave the company, and you know that you have to get Ursula's account locked, etc. The very first thing that you'll want to do is you'll want to run passwd, the one I tried earlier, passwd -L for lock. And I've kept the other information on the screen up here just in case so that we can compare it. Passwd -L, you log in, and then you see that it's changed the password expiry. If I go and run that grep again, I want you to notice there's one small difference. There is now, in front of the password, the secret password, an exclamation point. And no, you cannot just type exclamation point and then Linux. Doesn't work that way. The whole string is completely changed 100%. You will never be able to sign on as this user because this has effectively locked it by changing the whole password. So when a user leaves, you lock their account. If this user is leaving and you want to retain their home directory and their information, instead of running userdel -r and recursively removing the user's home directory, all we have to do is run userdel and then you log in. There was no cron tab or scheduled task table for this user. Now let's run that grep command again, and I want you to see that the user doesn't show up in any of those. So the user is gone. Let's list the home directories, -L here, and /home, and that's going to show us that the old home directory for ulogin is there. It's named ulogin, and also you're going to see that the 1001, that user ID, is unassociated with the user that we just deleted.
It's currently unaffiliated.
That's right, currently unaffiliated. Very good. And because of that, all the files are still there, and if we were to ls -L home, you log in and look in there, you're going to see that they're all associated with user 1001 or user ID 1001. Right. So we can, in one fell swoop, take and replace this user with a new user who will take over for this one. And it's just a couple of simple steps. So what we'll do, remember we've got the home with ulogin as the name. We're going to move /home/ulogin to /home/rossb. That changes the name of the home directory to match the user, which is a good thing. And then we're going to do a user add -d, and that stands for directory, which means I'm going to use the existing home directory specified. And then what I do is I say /home/rossb, and then the user I'm adding. At this point, and I've got a mailbox file there, that's okay. What'll happen here is I'm going to run the ls-l home, and you're going to see the matchup. There's now a user that has taken over. So rossb is now associated with user ID 1001. rossb has a home directory. All I'd have to do is go in and set the password at this particular point, and this user can now get onto the system.
Well, that's excellent. That way, you got all these orphaned objects that are out there because the user that you deleted is gone. You just assign it to a new user. They have access to these things, and they're back in business. And you got someone to take over the role.
The beauty of it is that the sole place that really happens is the two places is rename the home directory and reassociate user ID 1001 with the new user, and you're done.
That makes life a whole lot easier.
Sure
that
does.
is for sure. Great stuff. There's a lot when it comes to user and group administration. We're not going to lie to you here and say, oh, we've just exhausted everything. But we've definitely given you plenty to get your feet wet, right? A little bit of something to chew on and get you going with users and groups. Great stuff. Ross, thanks for joining us. Looks like we're at the end of another episode, but we're going to be back with more. So until then, we'll see you next time.